As dads, some days we feel like we have all the answers, and some days we feel like we don't have a clue. If that describes you, you're at the right place. This is the All Pro Dad Podcast. Once again, welcome to the All Pro Dad Podcast. We're excited today to have the founder of All Pro Dad, Mr. Mark Merrill. Mark, thank you for joining us.
Hey. Thanks, Ted.
Hey, in each episode, we want to answer one question or explore one question, and at the end, give you one pro move that's totally doable, but hopefully totally powerful to do that. And Bobby, what is our question of this episode?
All right, hold your breath. It's a tough one. Our question for this episode is, my teen is dating. Now what? Wow. Now what?
You know, we've had an episode on anxiety. This is definitely an anxiety-inducing topic when you start thinking about dating for our kids. And, you know, one of the things we want to really focus on this episode when it comes to dating, because there's so many aspects of this, and we'll dive into a lot of them. But how do we prepare our kids for the physical act of dating? For us, as Christians, you know, we want our sons and daughters to wait till marriage for sex. It's just that clear for us. But we also know that that is not a foregone conclusion for everybody listening. So just know that's our context going in. Why do you guys think that this is so important to talk about with our kids when it comes to boundaries and the physical act? The physical aspect of dating?
Because I think it's something that, you know, from a relational standpoint, they are maturing, they're growing. It can be very easy to jump into the physical aspect of things. When I was a teenage guy, I felt like having sex was a part of becoming a man. Like, you know, like I was growing with that kind of lie. So like, it was like, okay, I need to have sex. And then I'm, you know, like
you're less than if you haven't type of thing. Right?
Yeah. You're less than if you haven't.
Yeah.
And so like, I need to take that jump, and like my friends were doing it, and I need to, you know, so then I felt that pressure. And so just to have somebody there that is able to walk me through it and to think through it in a way that has truth to it. Mm-hmm. And particularly like our kids, you know, their prefrontal cortex is not developed until they're like 25. So like knowing cause and effect, like that's not something that they have going on. So we need to be with them, and we need to be there, like weighing out the consequences with them, because they don't have the ability to do it well.
We become their prefrontal cortex.
We become their prefrontal cortex.
Yeah. For me, my oldest daughter is 12, so she's not dating yet. The idea of that coming around the corner it's a combination of things. I'm not like terrified of it because I feel like she's very mature, and I'd like to think that we can have some open conversations about it. Like, you just don't want to get this wrong as a dad, because I think so much of dating, especially when you're younger, you're talking about your brain not being totally developed. You live in such an emotional world as a young person that any little mistake when it comes to this can be magnified, and that can cause problems down the road, not just physically, emotionally, socially. Like, there's so many things that can go wrong, and these mistakes last sometimes.
And men, as you listen to this podcast, there's something I think that's important to keep in mind if you have your AirPods in right now. We have to realize that if we don't speak into our children's lives on this topic, then somebody else will.
Yeah.
And that somebody else could be a friend, could be the next door neighbor, could be the media, could be through TikTok, through Instagram, through so many other outlets that they are looking at and watching every day. And so for me, my preference was to speak into their lives. And so I know that's what we want to share today. So I want just to encourage each and every one of you out there to take this seriously and to really use this as an opportunity to take some notes and speak into your son or daughter's life.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Because you're exactly right. The idea of waiting for sex for marriage has become very, very antiquated, to the point where it's even leaked into those who are Christians, who would say, you know, I think that feels antiquated and old, and we don't talk about that anymore. And, you know, with hookup culture, it's crazy. I mean, there was a professor at a university, and she gave this assignment to kids that were students, adults, young adults, that they had to go out on a date and start the whole process, and a phone cannot be involved whatsoever. And so the phone was, you have to ask them, you have to plan that, you have to go. And the intimacy of that, they would interview some of these students, the intimacy of that was more anxious than hookup culture, right? Than hooking up. And I thought, wow, that is crazy. So dating has so shifted that became this revolutionary idea to ask somebody on a date. And I just think that's important to acknowledge here.
And one of the things, I agree with that. And one of the things that we really need to think about is not only your child is dating now what, but we also need to, which we're going to do today, explore even before that happens, what are we to do to get ready for that? And the pre-dating period is as important as the actual dating period as well. And so I think one of the most important questions that we may touch on, but not spend too much time on, is not just your child is dating now what, but why? Asking that why behind the what, like what's the purpose of dating? And we were chatting a little bit about this, Bobby, before the show. And what is this ultimate purpose? And I see that ultimate purpose is that we're pointing to a long-term relationship, a lifelong relationship within the context of marriage, ultimately.
That's good.
Yeah, that's always been my perspective, but I don't want to assume that that's the perspective of most kids. When I think of dating, I try to think of the finish line, not like just the little mile markers as you go. Like, what's the point of all this? No one starts a marathon like, I guess I'll just run. Like you run because the goal is to get to the end and complete the marathon. And so I think when you're thinking about this in terms of dating with kids, it's a very important question to ask them. Why do you desire to go on a date with him? Or why do you think that it'd be good to go out on a date with her? And what does a date look like? Why do you think this is something? Is it because your friends are doing it? Is it because you want to do it? Is it because they asked you? Why is this important to you? And that's maybe the most important step of the whole process.
Just start there.
Yeah. And if it's the answer is like, I guess this is just what you do when you're this age, that's not a good enough answer. Like, I want to ask my daughter when she's a couple years from now, why do you want to go somewhere? Why do you want to go to the movies with that boy? Or why do you want to go to the park or whatever?
The why question is definitely a good one. And also, I think as Ted, as you set this up, I think one of the things that I believe is important to remember is as I was growing up, we always used the birds, the phrase, the birds and the bees. Did you give them the talk?
Right.
And it was a kind of a checklist thing. And many parents at that time didn't give the talk and probably still don't. And some gave the talk about the birds and the bees, but that was it. It was a one-time, one and done.
Yeah.
Okay, I've done that. I'm done.
Right.
But most important, this is not the talk, it's talks. It's ongoing engagement, not just once or twice, but ongoing engagement from before they start dating through the entire dating process, all the way into marriage, and then beyond marriage, as I'm experiencing right now with several of our children.
Yeah.
Yep. You continue to have these conversations. My oldest son has let me know how miserably I failed with the talk. He said, Dad, like, you told me all this emotional stuff. I just wanted to know how it worked. Yeah. And he goes, I had no clue. I had no more better clue of how this works than. And I remember, I was so proud of myself for that conversation. I remember exactly where we were. We were staining the deck together, have this conversation. He accidentally puts his hand in the stain and puts it on the side of the house, which I wouldn't let anybody paint over for years because that was the talk. And then he tells me I failed miserably. So it's this gauge of, hey, I want this to, I've got to tell them the functionalities of this. But BJ, you wrote a post that got a lot of traction about the physical aspect of dating and why that's so important to talk about. Can you talk about some of that? Walk us through that.
Sure. I mean, I think, when kids start dating, it can be very easy. If you don't set the stage for the boundaries of the physical part, then they're just going to sort of slide into it. If there's one thing that freaks dads out, I think, particularly with daughters, but it actually should be with their sons too. It's that they would have sex, particularly before the timing is, the context is right for it. We live in I think a very sexualized world,
for sure.
where like we've got pornography everywhere and easily accessed. And like Mark said so well, I'm so glad he said it. Someone's going to talk to you and teach your kids about this. And the one thing I'm like, a lot of them are watching pornography and that's what they're really learning.
Yeah. When you said that we're in such a sexualized world, it triggered a memory for me. I was doing a lot of research for childhood safety and development stuff for All Pro Dad. And one of the things we talked about was smartphone usage and, kids who are using smartphones, they text, they do Snapchat, they do all these different things. But one of the things that turned up in the research was, I believe the number is 42% of kids considered it normal to send nude photos to friends. Normal. And I was like, wow, that's not the word I would have associated with that. So you're telling me 2 out of 5 kids in school, just no big deal. Oh, you think that you need a nude picture today? Okay, I'll send you one. And I thought, wow, that's not normal in my brain. Right. But if that's the stuff that kids are doing in school, no matter what age they are, I think that's a red flag for dads, for sure.
That's the ongoing conversation part, right?
Right.
Yep. That it's not the talk, it's the talks. I think that's just so huge of this. BJ said the physical aspect needs to be talked about and boundaries set.
Yeah, from the very beginning. If we talk about, and Bobby said this, we're going to talk about a relationship as a marathon. So like if you're making out horizontally on the couch night 1, where are you going to be in a month? Where are you going to be in a year? And you always have to there's always going to be this temptation to take it up, to go to the next thing. It's like, let's do the next thing that we haven't done. Let's get the next thing. So like, okay, if we're drawing it out like a marathon, like I ran a marathon, you run your first mile, you're doing your first mile in 12 minutes. You're almost walking in the beginning. And you're gradually getting faster over time. If you blaze out really quick, you're going to be gone by mile 2.
Right.
And so you have to think about it that way, plan for it. And again, kids don't have the ability to do that. So like we need to start doing that with them. Like, hey, listen, you have started to date this person. Have you guys talked about what the boundaries are?
Yeah. And I think when you start talking about brains developing at different rates, and boys develop at a certain rate, girls develop at a certain rate, they're not always equivalent, and hormones are in the mix. It's a recipe for potential problems. And I think that even smart kids make dumb choices sometimes, but those dumb choices can have lasting consequences potentially. And so the more information that kids have before they go into a dating experience, the more guardrails they'll have to expect. They'll know what might be coming around the corner, even if they haven't actually started dating before, because you gave them the advice.
What we also have to realize is this is not just a physical act. Any kind of sexual encounter or relationship involves an emotional act. It actually involves a spiritual act. And the way God designed a man and a woman, designed sexuality, of course, that's why he designed it in the context of marriage, because when these acts occur, that there is a part of you that is physically involved, a part that's emotionally involved, a part that's spiritually involved. That's why God says when the two are married, the husband and wife, they become what? One flesh. They become one, and they're one in all those aspects. Our kids, our sons and daughters need to know, as we do have these talks, plural, with them, that they need to hear us that I want to talk to you. I want to share with you something that's so important. Why? Because I love you bigger than life. Because there is nobody on this earth, anybody you'll date, anybody else that has your best interests at heart more than I do. Yeah. And I want you to have a good, joyful, happy, wonderful, awesome relationship with a young man or young woman, as the case may be in the future, and have a wonderful marriage. And I'm saying these things to you because I'm the one that ultimately cares for you.
That's good. That's good. BJ, you talked about that the girl is not the gatekeeper. What do you mean by that?
I think predominantly it's, guys are the initiators physically. Now I know I'm going to get plenty of comments. No, I've seen girls that are, sexually aggressive and all that stuff. And I get that. There are plenty of them. But as a whole, it's guys are the initiators. And again, like when I was in high school, it was, okay, if I have sex, I'm a man. I think there's still a big part of that exists today. They think if I physically do this stuff with girls and it becomes the guy pushes and the girl holds the line for the couple. And that puts a lot of pressure. Bobby said it about nude pictures. A lot of times it's guys who are saying, send me nude pictures. And there's a lot of things out there that girls are feel pressure to that. So they even feel like they got to give certain things.
Well, every time I was about to say, you said the word give. Let's say that in this scenario, the final physical act of we're going to have sex is like the edge of the cliff. You can have your back to the edge of the cliff, but every little back step you take, you may not even realize how close you're getting to the edge of the cliff. But you're conceding a little bit more space, a little bit more space, and after a while you're like, "Whoop, I'm falling," and I didn't realize that I was that close to the edge. And I think that can easily sneak up on somebody who is wrapped up in the emotions of, oh, he thinks I'm cute or she thinks I'm cute, and we're just enjoying each other's company. And too late happens faster than maybe they think it will.
Too late happens faster. That's a good way to say it.
Well, and even when guys, it's like when guys have sex, they get high-fived. When girls have sex, they're looked at as
promiscuous,
kind of and
double standard.
Yeah, they're called certain things. So like we put this pressure on girls that they need to be the gatekeeper of this whole thing, and and it's not like the guy is the gatekeeper. It's both need to be the gatekeepers of this thing, and that's why the first thing we talked about of both of you need to set boundaries of what's going to be. What you're going to push and what you're not, what you're going to do, what you're not going to do.
I think with our sons and daughters, as we're preparing them for dating, that we ask them, so what do you want? What are the boundaries that you want to set? And the reason why you want to set these boundaries is because so that when these different situations come and you're alone with this young man or this young woman, that you have already made the decision on what you will do. Doesn't mean it won't be difficult. It just means you've set in stone in your mind and your heart how far is too far, or those kind of questions, what you'll do in those situations, and already have played it out and thought about it in your mind of what that would look like. So that one big question, not here's the boundaries you need to have. It's
right.
Tell me, honey, your daughter, what boundaries do you want in a relationship? What do you want it to look like, and where would you want this to end up?
And I think it's
the same for your
important-
son.
I think it's important to explain to them that boundaries are not negative. Boundaries are positive. Like I've never met someone who was upset there was a yellow double line on the road. Like if it's not there, you veer into traffic and boom, you got terrible problems. Or someone who complained that on a curving mountain road, there was a guardrail on the edge of the cliff. Like it's there for your good. It's not there to prevent you from having a good time. It's to keep you safe ultimately. And so if we can teach kids that, I think that's a win from the start.
Because I think, and you guys brought up earlier, these are questions that probably they have not thought to ask themselves. Like they've never thought of, especially if they're being, Mark, you said, kids are influenced by someone, and we want that influence to be us. But I don't think their friends are sitting around going, how are you setting boundaries? How do you feel? What do you want long-term for your relationship? They don't even think to ask the questions. And I think that's why things and I've talked to so many kids where they're like, it's not that I planned to. I didn't plan to. It just happened. So I think that's what these conversations do. Yeah.
Movies, TV shows, and influencers are not talking about it either. It's not. There's no examples that are kind of given on this.
Well, and you guys, we've said it a couple of, crossing boundaries. BJ, you says crossing boundaries has a cost.
Yeah, it has a cost. Yeah. So Mark talked about it a little bit, and I kind of use a different analogy. Like it's when you have sex, it's almost like putting your hand on a spider web. It's like, okay, you put it on there, you pull it back, and it kind of rips to pieces. And this is not something, a teenager is thinking about. They're just thinking about whatever they are in the moment. They're not thinking a couple steps ahead of, if I do this thing, what happens? Some of them have a little bit of capacity to do that, but they don't have full capacity to do it. So they roll into it, and that's where we need to be there to kind of be like, hey, we need to point out, hey, this has consequences to it. I mean, there are definitely, it's like, hey, teen pregnancy can happen, sexual disease can happen, but there's this emotional cost too of, this can lead to a deep kind of broken heart.
And let's also, in that conversation, in agreement with you, BJ, saying here are consequences. Mm-hmm. But sometimes we have to remind them that there's negative consequences, which is the ones you mentioned. Then there's positive consequences for our good choices.
Yeah.
And so they not only need to say no, and this is all negative, but sex is an amazing, beautiful thing. We didn't create it. God did.
Right.
And it's meant within this context, within these boundaries that we're discussing. And here are the good things that can occur if you make the right choices and show them this amazing future that you have when you make these wise choices.
I was having this conversation with a really good friend of mine the other day because our kids are about the same age, and our sons are a little bit younger, and we were thinking about this in context of teaching our sons because our sons like to be outdoors. They got little pocket knives in their pockets all the time, and so I was thinking about using a pocket knife as an example for teaching my son about sex. You tell me if this works, because it kind of worked for us. I said our pocket knife was designed to work one way. You open it, you use the sharp end, you slide it, you close it. That's how a knife works. If you opened it and flipped it over, it might cut with the dull side. Maybe, it depends if you're cutting a banana, it would maybe work. If you're cutting a tree, it wouldn't work. Like, it depends, but it wouldn't work as well. If you opened it and you turned it totally around, you grabbed the blade, now you got a big problem. Like, it was designed to work a certain way. And when you start manipulating it and using it in the way it wasn't designed, you got big problems. There's a way that it was supposed to be used. And I think we can make this analogy when we talk to kids about sex and say, hey, how are you using this tool? If you're going to be using it, you got to use it the right way. And I don't think I want to encourage my kids to use it too soon, but when that time comes, I want them to know that this is something that can really hurt you if you don't do it the right way.
I think I love that analogy. I think it's important to kind of then take that into the specifics of what we're talking about. I think it's important to be honest about, okay, these are the things that can happen. This is the type of heartbreak that you have. A lot of times we leave it very general. Hey, make good choices. Well, like Chap Clark talks about this. He's an expert in adolescence. Like they have no idea what that means. Yeah. Stop saying that. They have no idea what that means. They have no idea what good choices means. You got to tell them what they are and what the final outcome can possibly be, good or bad.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I look, Mark, what just keeps hitting as you're talking to is questions versus commands or versus mandates to say, hey, why do you think you should wait? What happens? What are the payoffs? And so I think it's by asking them questions, it's pulling that out of them.
Questions with our kids are critical. And that's the one thing that I tried to do a lot of, probably could have done a lot more of it, is just asking those questions of our kids, not only in dating context, but in life and everything. And, well, what do you think should be done here? And if this happened, what would you do next? And why do you think this is important ultimately? And, using that Socratic method where you're asking questions to lead them perhaps to their own conclusion on the matter, where they, again, have that ownership, they buy in. And so asking really good questions is really critical.
That's good. Next one here is the choice is theirs and the person they are dating.
Yeah. I think we get into this false belief that we can control what our kids are going to do. And the reality is if they want to date somebody behind your back, they'll figure out a way to do it. I'll never forget my youth leader at camp. The first night he said, hey, I just want to tell you guys, I'm a deep sleeper and I know that you guys can sneak out and get away with it. But I'm just going to ask out of respect for our friendship that you don't do that. Because I think it'll hurt it, not because I'm going to think about you differently, but because you're going to know that you pulled one over on me. And we were all like, Oh, like what a brilliant thing to say. But it was true as well. So our kids are like, we need to prepare them for this and give them the honesty of it and let them know that at the end of the day, this is their life and the choice is going to be theirs. The power is going to be theirs to do, but the consequences they're going to have to deal with are going to be theirs as well. So, hey, listen, I'm not going to be there all the time, and I'm not going to be looking over your shoulder all the time. Here's what I think you should do. Here are the boundaries of my house. You can work your way around that if you want to, but ultimately it might be the thing that hurts you the most.
Mark, before we land the plane here, any last words on this topic?
Well, on this topic overall, the ultimately, the big picture thing that I think about that just ran through my mind is having those heart connections with our kids, and that we can not only talk about this topic, but we can continue to talk about this topic in many other topics in life, and that they trust us, that we are the real deal, we are who we say we are, and that we have their best interests at heart, and they're going to be comfortable sharing with things, even when they blow it, when they make mistakes as well, just like we all make different mistakes in life, that they come to us and we don't lecture them, we rather listen. And they're going to know that they're going to experience certain consequences, negative, perhaps if they make the wrong decisions, or positive if they make the right ones. But when they make those bad decisions and they experience those negative consequences, those natural consequences are going to come. It doesn't necessarily help for us to rub it in. At that point in time, whatever that mistake is, and if that mistake is in this context in dating or a sexual relationship before marriage or whatever, they're going to experience the pain. So what they need is they need a listening ear, a guide by their side, a father. They need a parent, not a pal, and they need a father coming alongside and wrapping your arms around and said, you know what? I'm sorry, but you know what? I'm here always for you. I love you no matter what. That gets back to that. I love you no matter what. I'm here. And just hugging them, embracing them, showing the way forward from where they are now.
This seems like a great place to wrap it up there. Thank you so much, Mark. Bobby, what's our pro move of this episode? This one's a little bit different though, huh? This is a little bit deeper.
It is. Yeah, a lot of the times the pro move that we give is, here's one thing that you can do to make life better. And those are very helpful, but I think this one is such a deep conversation, and you're going to have, like you said, Mark, not one talk about dating, but many, many talks. But in order to do that, you gotta pick one day to start. And so I think this is where our pro move comes in today. Put a date on your calendar when you're going to have the first, the second, maybe your 100th talk about this. Put it on the calendar and do it and stick to it. Because we are, as guys, I know I'll speak for myself. If it's on the calendar, I'll probably do it. If it's not and it's up here, it'll just float out of my head and I'll forget. Put it on the calendar, make it a priority, and have that conversation with your son or daughter.
That's great. Thank you so much. You guys, thanks again for teaching me today. Thank you. We hope that all those of you who are listening were encouraged once again to continue to be an all-pro dad. Thanks for listening to the All Pro Dad podcast. All Pro Dad is the fatherhood program of the nonprofit Family First. Along with our motherhood program, iMom, we exist to help you love your family well. Subscribe to our daily email, the All Pro Dad Play of the Day, by going to allprodad.com/subscribe and get daily powerful and practical fatherhood tips in your inbox. The All Pro Dad podcast is hosted by me, Ted Lowe, produced by Bobby Lewis.